In the heart of Lagos, where skyscrapers pierced the humid sky and the streets buzzed with restless ambition, there stood a man who seemed to own it all, Akin Alabi. The name alone commanded respect. His tech empire, Alabi Innovations, had spread like wildfire across Africa, bringing cutting-edge solutions to old problems and carving out a future many had only dreamed of. At 40, he was one of the richest men on the continent, a symbol of what Nigeria would become when talent met opportunity. And yet, wealth had its own kind of loneliness. From his penthouse suite on Victoria Island, Akin often looked out over the sprawling city, lights blinking like a thousand small promises. He had everything he had ever worked for: cars, houses, international accolades. Yet, at night, when the parties ended and the champagne stopped flowing, the silence crept in. It was a silence money could not fill. Relationships had been the trickiest part. Women came easily enough: socialites, models, heiresses. They arrived with smiles as bright as diamonds, their laughter too sharp, their eyes always calculating. Akin had learned to spot it. That glint of greed, that hunger for association rather than connection. Trust, he realized, was a luxury he couldn't buy. He had almost given up on the idea of finding someone who saw him, the man behind the empire, the boy who once repaired broken radios in a dusty Ibadan workshop just to help his mother parents, the boy who still believed that success should serve a purpose bigger than himself. Tonight was another gala, another charity function filled with sycophants and fake smiles. He sighed, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored suit. The venue, an opulent hall adorned with gold drapes and chandeliers, awaited him. Cameras would flash, reporters would fawn, politicians would slap him on the back and pretend to be friends. It was all a game he had mastered long ago. As his driver opened the door to the waiting car, Aki allowed himself a brief moment of hope, a whisper, almost silly in its persistence. Maybe tonight will be different. He straightened his jacket, suited his expression into the practiced mask of charm, and stepped into the Lagos night, unaware that fate was already weaving new threads into the fabric of his life. Threads stitched by a girl he had never met, a girl untouched by wealth, unspoiled by the games of power, a girl who would remind him what it meant to feel human again. Ijoma Okafor had always believed that greatness was born from humanity. Raised in the Red Earth village of Umunnechi, she had grown up in a world where everyone knew your name, where neighbors could scold you as quickly as your own parents, and where dreams were often whispered rather than shouted. Her father, a retired school teacher, and her mother, a trader of fabrics in the local market, had worked tirelessly to give her a chance at something bigger. They believed in education, not just as a path to a better job, but as a weapon to change the world. And Ijeoma carried that belief like a torch. When she earned a scholarship to the University of Lagos, it was celebrated like a national victory in her village. Church services had paused to offer special prayers. Her mother had cried with both pride and fear: pride that her daughter was going far, and fear that the city might swallow her up and turn her into someone unrecognizable. But Lagos had not changed Ijoma. In the city's relentless hustle, the crowded streets, the impatient horns, the sea of faces, she had remained steady, like a calm river cutting through chaos. She rented a small room near campus, sharing kitchen space with three other girls. She studied by candlelight when the electricity failed and spent weekends tutoring children in low-income neighborhoods. Beauty was something Ijoma wore unknowingly. Her dark skin gleamed in the sun. Her almond eyes held the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth, and her smile, when it appeared, was warm enough to disarm even the coldest stranger. But she wasn't loud about it. She wore simple clothes, mostly jeans and plain blouses, and saved her money for books rather than jewelry. Love? That was a distant idea, something for later, after her degree, after her plans to start a non-profit to educate rural girls had taken root. Besides, the men she met were often interested only in the surface, a pretty face, a soft laugh. They did not see the fire inside her. And Ijoma had decided long ago that she would rather walk alone than with someone who didn't. When she received an unexpected invitation to a prestigious charity gala, one of the largest gatherings of Lagos elites, she almost declined. It wasn't her world. She didn't own any designer dresses. She didn't know how to sip champagne or make small talk about investments and yacht parties. But her mentor at the university had insisted. It's time the right people saw you, Professor Adewale said with a knowing smile. You have something the world needs, Ijoma. Don't hide it. With a borrowed dress, a simple elegant gown in deep blue, and shoes a size too big, she entered the grand hall on that fateful evening, unaware that her life was about to shift in ways she could not yet imagine. As she stepped through the marble entrance, chandeliers glittering above her and violins humming softly in the background, she straightened her shoulders. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to represent the dreams of the girls back home. Girls who believed that one day they too could stand among kings. She did not see Akin Alabi across the room, watching her as if a storm had just entered his carefully controlled world. Not yet, but life, as always, was patient. The Gala Night. The Gala Night was a living portrait of Lagos at its most extravagant. Gold trimmed pillars, an ocean of glittering gowns, and the low murmur of conversations about oil deals, tech mergers, and political alliances. Waiters in crisp white shirts floated through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes, and somewhere in the corner, a jazz band played a soft, lazy tune. Akin Alabi had been here before, a thousand versions of this night, and yet tonight felt different. He stood near the edge of the ballroom, his tie slightly loosened, a glass of water untouched in his hand. Around him, familiar faces clamored for his attention, politicians who wanted funding, businessmen who wanted partnerships, women who wanted more than he was willing to give. And then he saw her. At first, he thought he was imagining things. A woman in a simple blue gown, standing alone near the grand staircase, no flashing jewelry, no entourage of admirers, just calm, quiet elegance. She wasn't trying to be noticed. That was precisely why she stood out. Her gaze was not hunting for attention, it was curious, observing, as if she was memorizing the moment, not for social media likes, but for the simple wonder of it. There was something disarmingly real about her, something untouched. Ake found himself moving before he even realized it, weaving through the crowd with a magnetic pull he couldn't explain. When he finally approached, she turned and their eyes met. It was not an explosion, not the thunderclap people often described. It was something subtler, deeper, like two souls nodding in quiet recognition. Good evening, Akin said, offering a polite smile. This young woman smiled back, polite but guarded. Good evening, sir. I'm Aki Alabi. He extended his hand. I know, she said, her voice soft but steady. She shook his hand firmly, not with awe, but with respect one gives another human being, nothing more. Akin chuckled, sensing immediately that she was not like the others. I'm guessing you're not here to network or pitch a startup. She smiled again, a touch more relaxed. No, I'm here on scholarship. My professor thought it would be educational. And is it? He asked, genuinely curious. She looked around. The towering chandelier, the clusters of people clinking glasses and laughing too loudly, and then back at him. It's enlightening, she said carefully, but not in the way they intended. Akin laughed, a deep, warm sound he hadn't made in a long time. Finally, someone who tells the truth. There was a pause, not awkward, but comfortable, as if both of them were silently adjusting to this unexpected current between them. Ijoma, she offered, almost shyly. My name is Ijoma Okafor. A beautiful name for a beautiful spirit, Aki thought. They stood there for a moment longer, the noise of the gala fading into the background. Neither knew where this would lead. Neither knew that, in the midst of all the noise and glitter of Lagos, they had found something rare, a beginning that wasn't built on ambition or appearances, but something quieter, truer. As they spoke about university reforms, rural education, and the dreams of a new Africa, the foundation of their bond was laid, brick by honest brick. And somewhere deep inside him, Aki felt the first real hope he had tasted in years. The beginning of a bond. The days after the gala slipped by like a dream neither of them wanted to wake from. Akin was a busy man, meetings upon meetings with investors, government consultations, keynote speeches at international conferences. His life was scheduled to the minute, every hour accounted for. Yet somehow, in the quiet spaces between boardrooms and business deals, his thoughts kept drifting back to Ijoma. He had met countless women in his lifetime, but none had stayed in his mind like this. There was something in her honesty, her rare kind of grace, that clung to him. He stared at her name in his phone more than once before finally gathering the nerve to send a message. It was a pleasure meeting you at the gala. I'd like to hear more about your projects when you're free. The reply came later that evening. Thank you, sir. I would love that. And please, just Aki. It was a small thing, but it made him smile. They agreed to meet over a coffee at a quiet cafe tucked away from Lagos' endless traffic and noise. Aki arrived first, his security detail discreetly stationed nearby, though he insisted they keep their distance. He didn't want Ijoma to feel intimidated. When she arrived, she looked different, but no less breathtaking. A simple blouse, jeans, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, no makeup, no pretense, just herself. And that, Aki realized, was what he craved most. Their conversation was easy, flowing from school reforms to artificial intelligence, from personal dreams to their shared frustration with the slow pace of change in Nigeria. Akin was surprised, delighted to find someone who could challenge his ideas without fear or flattery. I want to create an education program for girls in rural communities, Ijoma said, her eyes shining with conviction. Not just donations, real structures, scholarships, mentorships, technology hubs. Aki listened, truly listened, something he rarely did anymore. You're not thinking small, he said, impressed. I can't afford to, she replied simply. They can't afford for me to. That night, when Aki returned to his penthouse, he found himself replaying her words, her voice, the quiet certainty with which she spoke. It stirred something inside him, something long dormant. Over the next few weeks, their interactions deepened. Coffee turned into long walks through the botanical gardens, casual dinners at hidden local spots instead of fancy hotels. Late night text messages evolved into early morning phone calls. They spoke of dreams, failures, family, and faith. But beneath it all, an unspoken current buzzed between them, a slow, steady pull that neither dared name yet. Aki admired her restraint. She never asked about his wealth. She never acted impressed by his influence. To her, he was just Aki, a man with dreams and flaws, not a walking empire. And Ijoma found herself lowering walls she hadn't even known she had built. In Aki's eyes, she saw someone who didn't want to change her, but who believed she could change the world and trusted her to try. It was the beginning of something neither had planned for, something delicate and beautiful and utterly terrifying. But some beginnings, they both knew, were worth the risk. The confession. The evening air was thick with the scent of rain, even though the skies over Lagos held back their tears for now. The city, usually bursting with noise, seemed unusually soft that night, as if even the streets understood that something delicate was about to happen. Aki had invited Ijoma to a private dinner, not the glittering ballroom she had seen him in, but a small rooftop restaurant overlooking the lagoon. The view was stunning, a thousand city lights twinkling like distant stars, the water below reflecting every flicker. He had chosen it for a reason. He wanted her to see the city the way he saw her, beautiful, powerful, quietly extraordinary. Ijoma arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in golds and deep purples. She wore a simple white dress that floated around her ankles, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked ethereal, almost untouchable. Akin stood as she approached, unable to hide the awe on his face. "You look breathtaking," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Ijoma blushed, looking down shyly. "Thank you. This place is beautiful." "Not as beautiful as tonight," he said before he could stop himself. The waiter brought them food, jollof rice, grilled prawns, fresh fruits, but neither of them touched much of it. Their hunger was elsewhere, caught up in the electricity between their words, their glances. They spoke of dreams again, of fears they rarely admitted even to themselves. And then, as the last of the evening light faded, Aki leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the table. "Ijoma," he began, his voice unusually quiet, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her heart already pounding in her chest. "I spent most of my life believing that I didn't need anyone," he said, searching her face. "That success, power, money, those things were enough. They had to be. Because every time I let someone close, they wanted something from me." Ijoma said nothing, sensing he needed to let the words pour out. "But you," Akin shook his head, almost laughing at himself. "You don't want anything from me. You don't even seem to realize how rare that is." He reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "You make me want more than the life I've built," he said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You make me believe that maybe I deserve something real." Ijoma felt the world tilt slightly, her breath caught. "I don't want to scare you," Aki continued, his voice raw. "I know you're different. I know you're cautious, and I will wait, Ijoma, as long as it takes. I just needed you to know I'm falling for you." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full, full of everything unsaid, every beat of their hearts, every fear and hope crashing into one another. Ijoma squeezed his hand lightly, grounding herself. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Ah, I've never, I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to know," Aki said immediately. "We'll figure it out together." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rush of feeling. "I feel it too," she said finally. "I don't know what it means yet, but I feel it too." Aki exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He stood up, coming around the table to her side, and offered his hand. "Walk with me," he asked slowly. Without hesitation, Ijoma placed her hand in his. Together, they stepped into the night, into a future neither of them fully understood, but both were willing to trust. Because sometimes love wasn't a thunderclap. Sometimes it was a soft, steady unfolding, a hand reaching across the void, finding another hand, and simply holding on.